Today is October 27th, and we are at the Filipino American National Historical Society Museum, and we are going to interview Richard Gacer about his life. So you can just start talking about where you were born, your parents, and then we will.
Yeah, can I look at that?
Okay.
Can you make me a copy of that? Because I don't.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then I'll just have some other questions.
Okay.
But go ahead.
Okay, my name is Richard Gacer. I'm American Filipino, born in Modesto, California in 1930. My father was from the Philippines, who was a labor contractor. My mother was Spanish Filipino. She was born in San Francisco before the earthquake. And my great-grandfather was a sailor, but he had asthma, and so he had to retire, and they moved, my grandmother and my grandfather moved to Oakdale. And there's where I grew up. And I have my mother married a Filipino. He was from the Philippines. He was a labor contractor, very successful. And they did very, very well. The only problem is my father liked to gamble. And so his gambling made it difficult for them. Other than that, I grew up in Oakdale. It's a farm community. In my neighborhood, all of the Filipinos families were all farm workers. And when I grew up later, I became a farm worker. In fact, at 13 years old, I had my first farm experience. I went to Kerman, which is near Fresno, and I picked grapes there. And that was my first experience as a farm laborer at 13 years old. Later on, when I was in high school, I did farm work in Fairfield and Isleton, picking pears. So, that was my early background, and that's what I knew. And again, like I said, I lived in Oakdale. Then when I got married with Sally in 1951, I was still working in the fields. And then American Can, I don't know any of you guys remember that, in look at this thing. In 1953, American Can opened up a can plant over there on California Street. And there's where I got a job as a factory worker. And I left the fields. And I worked there as a machine operator. I was also a lift driver. And I became a quality control inspector. So I finally had a job. I was out of the fields, and we had a very good union. It was the United Steelworkers of America, and so we had a good union, good benefits, and I was very, very happy leaving the fields. Finally, I had a chance to go back to school. All the guys that I grew up with in Oakdale and Livingston, they were going to college. And they were getting their degrees and getting good jobs. And I said, if I get a chance, I'll go back. So I was very high in seniority at American Can Company, so I was able to choose my shift that I wanted to work. And I went back to college part-time. And I graduated from Delta College. I went to UOP. I got my BA degree there, and I got my master's degree. And so that was my educational background. So I was very, very fortunate. My wife supported me. UOP was affordable at that time, so I was able to buy my books, pay my tuition, and when I graduated, I owed no money to the university. Okay, now where am I? I don't know. I look at that.
It says you were in the military.
Oh yeah, I grew up during World War II, and And so all the Filipinos in my community served in the service. They served in the Filipino battalion, which was all Filipinos. And most of the Filipino battalion were farm workers. So see, most of them were drafted from California and Washington and Arizona. So I grew up during that time. And so when I had a chance to go, I was comfortable about going into the service, and I went into the service. I volunteered. I was stationed in Fort Lewis, Washington, and that was my first experience of being away from home. I was 18 years old, right out of high school, and at that time, President Truman was trying to get more of the youth to volunteer for the service, and so I was in one of those programs where we were trying to get young people to get some service experience. I went to clerk type of school, and I worked in regimental headquarters, and that was my first experience in which I was working in an office atmosphere. And that was, it was really something to see, and to be working in the fields, and I'm working in an office, and I did very well. I did very well. And then, when I went to work for American Canada, as I said, I had a chance to go back to school. So I went to UOP, Delta College, part-time, got my degrees. I also, at that time, it was about 1967, I had enough units to get my teaching credential. So I started teaching. I taught at Nile Garden, which is in the Menteith Unified School District. I taught there for 4 years. I went to Fremont Junior High. I taught there. And then I had a chance to get a job as a teacher with California Youth Authority, which was paying excellent money. So I went to California Youth Authority, and I spent my entire career in Youth Authority. I was a teacher. I worked in a parole office, and then I became a community services consultant. And that's when I really had a wonderful experience. Youth Authority was responsible for inspecting any county facility that detained youth. So I was assigned all the counties from Bakersfield to Del Norte. So I had all these counties, and my responsibility was to inspect any juvenile hall, any camp facility where youth were detained. And so by doing that, I just had a chance to travel. I had a chance to meet with law enforcement. I worked with the probation departments. I worked with the juvenile court. And I even met judges because we had juvenile court judges. So it was a fantastic experience, and that's what I did. At that time, in 1980, I was still a community service consultant. That's when we started getting the Southeast Asians. And the first Asians were the Vietnamese, then the Laotians, and then the Cambodians. And at that time, the youth were having difficulties adjusting to this new society. So they were getting into trouble. And so we were beginning to see more Southeast Asian youth in our institutions. And that's when I started to get involved with the Southeast Asian organizations here in San Joaquin County, and tried to introduce them to what Youth Authority was about, and tried to get them to see that they needed to focus on youth, because the youth were in a whole new environment. They were going to school. Some of them had language problems. So that was my experience in working with Youth Authority. Basically, it was a fantastic experience. I learned a lot. I did a lot. I was able to travel with my wife because I was traveling up and down the state. And as long as I used my own car, I could bring my wife. So we traveled to Bakersfield, Del Norte, many counties that I worked with. I was able to bring my wife and share the experience. Other than that, I can say is that because of my experience, I have some shall say, I have some experience in working with the community, and I think that the Filipinos and the other Asian community need to become more aggressive in working with the total community. Filipinos work with Filipinos, Chinese work with Chinese, Japanese, and yet we're part of a community where we have an excellent reputation. Filipinos go back to the 30s when we worked in the fields. The Chinese had the businesses downtown. The Japanese had their farms. So in terms of the reputation of the Asian community, it's excellent. And so I think that we need to take advantage of that, and because what happens is our youth are kind of getting lost in the situation. I would say our youth are more American than they're Asian. And like I say, my kids, if you see the picture, all married to white or petite. And you know, that's all right. I'm not against it. I'm just simply saying that that's our experience with the Filipino community is very narrow. And that's why I say I think that, you know, being able to talk about this I started a business. It's called SNR Stockton Properties. And I've donated money to FANHS for the School of Scholarships. We've named the 5 scholarships after Filipino or Asian history. We're calling one Pete Galvez, who was the first Filipino pilot in the United States during World War II. I call one of the scholarships Stockton. Oh God, I think I need to look at that. Well, I call it the Stockton Asian. Oh golly, I'm sorry. Anyway, I've named the scholarships after Asian community, and one is called, like I say, FANHS has a scholarship, and I named one of the scholarships after my company, which is SNR Stockton Properties. So that's about where it is. I think that we need, as a community, to broaden out a little bit, and you know, I think the more we are seen as in the entire community, the more effective we'll be as a minority community. That's about it.
Okay, now talking about the youth, and what did you do with the other, like, were you in the sports teams? What did you do as a youth for fun instead of just working, you know?
Well,
what did you do for fun?
Okay, that's a good question. You see, in the 40s, about 44, that's when we started forming the Filipino Asian clubs, remember? We had clubs, Filipino clubs in Vallejo, San Francisco, Oakland, Stockton, San Jose, Salinas. And that, I think I wrote about this. I said that this was the first time that we as a minority group came together, and we really, in other words, we were a group that knew everybody. I wasn't from Oakdale, but I knew people in Salinas. I knew people in San Francisco. San Francisco knew people in Stockton. So we were really a community that interacted because of sports, basketball, volleyball, softball. We went to dances together, and we were really, that's why I say you don't see this today, because the need that we brought together was unique at that time. And so for us to have a life, a social life, because again, we were minorities in an all-white school. So by us organizing our own clubs and what have you, we had a social life, and it's something that I'm not sure, we're losing it. Now, that bothers me. I think that experience, somehow we should recognize what it was and how beautiful it was, because, like I say, all the Filipinos in Northern California, we knew each other. Filipinos today don't know anybody. In other words, I mean, you know, people from Stockton don't know anybody in Salinas. I did. Yeah, so anyway, it was a unique time, and that's why when I wrote that article for FANHS, I was trying to at least acknowledge that particular period, because it no longer exists. Well, the Japanese did it, the Chinese did it, nobody does it anymore. So we're all Americanized, and yet it is a piece of history that we should try to maintain as long as we can.
So how did you meet Sally?
Well, my wife, I met my wife, okay, this is a rather interesting story. You know Simon? Mm-hmm. Okay, Simon, I was standing in front of the pool hall there on El Dorado Street. And Simon and Sally were across the street. They were just coming out of Stockton Junior High or Stockton High. And I saw them both walking, and here I saw this young girl, 14. She's 14 years old. I was 17. And I saw her, and I said, oh my gosh, I've got to meet her. Later on, there was a basketball tournament in Salinas. She was there, and I had a chance to dance with her. And then when I came back, I took her to the show. And so she was just 14, I was just 17. And then when I went into the service, you know, we went together. And then she wrote me a Dear John letter, which was, you know, that happens. And then when I got out of the service, we got back together, and we got married in 1951. I have 4 children, 4 beautiful sons, excellent, beautiful daughter-in-laws. I've got 9 grandchildren, and no, I was very fortunate because I came from a strong family. My mother, my grandmother, my uncles, they were always together. They were there for Thanksgiving, Christmas, everybody went to Oakdale. I was telling my friend here, I says, during the time when my grandmother was alive, all the family went to Oakdale to be with my grandmother. And that's how it. I'm sorry, I cry very easily.
It's a beautiful story.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful story. I like to hear how people back then, how they met their significant others.
Oh.
Because, you know, I hope you've told this story also to your kids and your grandkids, so that, you know, they can keep telling that story of how you guys met.
Well, you know, that's interesting because, like I say, it was a special time when we were we were a Filipino community in Northern California.
So how did your parents meet?
Oh golly, my mother was born in San Francisco. My father came to the United States when he was about, my nose is running.
She's getting...
Yeah, please, I've got... My father came to the United States when he was about 17 years old. He was a farm laborer, and he became a labor contractor. Very successful labor contractor. So he had trucks, we had a bunkhouse where men came, we had a kitchen, my father was a very, I guess I said, a very successful labor contractor. The only problem was he loved to gamble, and you know, that was another issue. But and then like I say, my mother was born in San Francisco, grew up in Oakdale, graduated from Oakdale High, so, you know, we're small folk people.
Okay. What else can you think of? Are there particular places in what used to be Little Manila or, you know, Chinatown, whatever? Are there any particular places that stand out in your mind of either a favorite place to go to or where you used to hang out or anything like that?
Well, you know, after they did the Ricos, all those places got torn down. So we had, you remember, we had the Ricos had I'm going to say Rico. They had they had the restaurant, the Filipino restaurant, and we had several pool halls, and then you had had several small Filipino businesses that catered primarily to Filipinos. We had a photography shop, and I can't remember the gentleman's name. I can see his face. He had a photography shop, but most of the Filipinos were right there. And then when they did the reconstruction, all that is gone.
What is it that you want your grandkids to remember about you?
Well, that's a very good question, because I think what I would like them to remember, that we're a close family, that my sons are close, my grandchildren are close, I'm close to my cousins. So I think that would be nice, if this close relationship, just enjoying each other, supporting each other, I think that would be a nice, because that's where I come from. In other words, I had uncles that supported me, my uncles that loved me, my mother, my grandmother. So there was a lot of love and warmth in the family. And I believe that's what I would like to see. And I think the Filipino community has that. The only trouble is now, we're very fragmented. We're Americanized to the point, and that's why I'm coming back and feeling, wait a while, I have something to offer FANHS. And so, like I said, I have a good business. I can provide some financial support, and I want my business to continue this relationship. And so that's why I say, one of these days I'm going to have lunch with you, and so my sons can see this is what we're supporting, and this is our commitment to the Filipino community of Stockton. And that's about it.
Okay. And you think of...
I think you picked up on everything already, what we talked about,
Yeah.
everything about the story of Auntie Sally. I mean, the Revelars, they're...
Are there any kind of family traditions, or whether it's a cultural tradition or just a tradition, with your family that you're passing down so that it doesn't get forgotten?
That's a good question. That's a good question. I think, like I say, I'm close to my sons, and so, and we're working to see, we've got a business, so we're now working together as business people as well as family. So that's a unique experience where you've got a business that's owned by your sons that are running the whole thing. When I die, they're going to, S&R Stockton Properties will be their business. And so that's what we're doing now, is we're looking at how we conduct our business, how we maintain our records, how we can improve what we're doing, and how we can strengthen our relationship with the community. That's why I say one of these days I'm going to have lunch with you, and so you can meet my sons, because I want my sons, though they may not become part of the total Filipino community, they still are Filipinos,
Yes.
and they can support, and we have an excellent business, and maybe what we're doing can be a model to other Filipinos, because most of the Filipinos, they tend to figure it's a Filipino business running for Filipinos. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but you see, and Chinese. But all I'm saying is, I think that we need to recognize that there's another world out there, and that we need to feel impacted. I'd like to have the Chamber of Commerce or whatever say, gee, it's S&R Stockton Properties, a Filipino American business, and they're providing scholarships for kids, they're providing funds for an organization, and they're doing it for the total community. This is our home.
I noticed that you said in the 1950s you bought your first house?
Yeah.
What, did you have any problems buying a house north of Harding, like they used to say?
You know, that's an excellent question. When I bought my first property in 1952, and because I was going to go back to school, and when I came to Stockton, there was no Asians being rented north of Harding. That was the rule. So everything they showed me was south of Harding. However, I bought a piece of property, land, so I got through it. So now I can build my house because I own the land. I didn't buy a house, but I didn't have to go through a realtor. So that's why I say I was one of the first Filipinos to move in country club. And, I respected everybody, and my wife, we had a few problems, but by and large, we were comfortable who we were, and I wasn't super sensitive about it. I just, hey, I knew I was going to school, I had a good job, I had a good family, I had a good name in the community. That's all that I cared about.
Okay. Anything else? Anything else you'd like to?
Well, like I say, I think I've already said it. My business will continue, and we're prosperous. We're doing real well, and we will continue to be a supporter of FANHS and happy to do it.
Well, we appreciate it.
Okay, no problem.
We do. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
And we hope, someday for the museum, because this museum, since it's a national museum, and we have stuff from not just Stockton but all over, but we want the personal histories of people so that the younger generation can learn about how it used to be, because it's all being forgotten.
Well, I think this. I think that, and I'm not sure how to say it. I think we need to recognize that we are part of this community, and that because we're part of a community which is made up of everything, that we should have a relationship with everybody, and not just focus on the Filipino community, because that can be done. But to develop a relationship with business organizations, we need to do that, and I'm not sure we know how to do it. And that's why I think one of the things that I would like to do with my company is to eventually maybe work something out with you and have a little workshop. Yeah, we bring 3 or 4 young Filipinos together and say, hey, we'd like you to meet this guy who has a business. And you could, guy who runs a grocery store, you could invite him, because we need to recognize that we can be business owners. And we don't always have to work for somebody else. And I think that's important, because until we make that breach, we see ourselves as a Filipino business in Stockton. And I'm saying I am a Filipino business in Stockton that serves all of Stockton.
Okay. Very good.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, that's where we're coming from. And like I say, she's my caregiver. I'm getting up there. But thank goodness my brain's still pretty good, and
yeah, the only people, like, I can ask my Uncle Albert, he's same age as you. I can ask him questions because he still remembers.
Yeah.
And so it's a good thing you still remember things, because there aren't too many more. Letty Perez, we can ask.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. My era, the era that I'm talking about, Jimmy Ente, Dave Rico, myself. I'm talking about men. I'm talking about I'm not. But those are the English. Yeah. And even just like I told You asked about whether they had some photos. Well, who in the hell could afford a camera? They'd take it to the drugstore to get. Nobody took pictures.
Yeah.
Nobody.
Only the Filipino photographers, I could name one.
Yeah, well,
Tony Pena is the one I knew about.
Well, there was one. Oh man, I can't think of. He had a business. Remember the old Manila Inn right there? There was a guy next door to that had a photography shop, and I can see his face, but I can't. But no, it's I've lived here and I'm going to die here, and
Okay.
But anyway,
Okay.
I wish you guys a lot of luck, and like I say, you have our support, and like I'm saying, my sons, we need to get together because, like I say, my sons will take over the business, and we're going to continue to grow, and we're going to continue to do well, and we're a business that feels committed, to your organization.
Yeah.
We'll plan that.
Yeah, we should get together, and like I say, because unless you meet my sons, and they have a relationship with you, when I go there, this thing could be gone, and I don't want that. I want S&R Stockton Properties to be a supporter of during as long as we can.
Yeah,